Assalamualaikum everyone. So we are here at the philosophy room, and today we have a very distinguished guest, Dr. Taimur Rahman with us, and we are extremely delighted that we are meeting him in person, because we first thought that we'll have a conversation with him, but it would be online because he is a very busy man, especially given the situation right now in Pakistan. But we got a hold of him personally, and we have you on board with us. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us.
Not at all. Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
No problem, sir. So I'll first say a few words about him, even though he doesn't need an introduction, because I know that people who are listening to us live know you very well.
Very well.
But just because he is with us for the very first time in the philosophy room. So we want to introduce him properly, in the sense that we usually like people say, he's this. So Taimur Rahman has a PhD from SOAS, so that's his first, qualification, Dr. Taimur Rahman from there. And he is a musician called of the band called Lal.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yes.
And apart from that, he is also a professor, a distinguished professor at LUMS. कोई चीज़ भूल तो नहीं रहा ना सर? Apart from that, yes, now the important thing, he is a socialist, not a communist. Remember that. He is a socialist. And we'll get into why is this important. Communism and socialism. What's the difference? Why is it important? We'll get to that in the conversation. But before we begin, I want to say some remark in the beginning, so we should set the agenda for the interview. And that is we look at the philosophy room, we look at Dr. Taimur Rahman as a political philosopher.
Thank you.
How do you define socialism?
So, I don't think I could offer a definition that would belong to me. But firstly, before I begin to answer that question, thank you so much, On and Wajahat, for inviting me to this wonderful podcast.
It's a pleasure, sir.
I think you built something quite wonderful here with the philosophy room. It's quite unique. I think I haven't seen such a venture anywhere in Pakistan. So congratulations to both of you on this wonderful work, and for all the wonderful words you've spoken on for me and to introduce me. Thank you so much for giving me this incredible respect. So as I was saying, I don't think I'd like to offer an explanation or a definition of socialism that belongs exclusively to me. I think I'd much rather prefer to offer an explanation that belongs to European history, and therefore also, but now to world history, which is that socialism is first and foremost a concept of society in which economic resources are controlled not by a small capitalist class, but are controlled collectively by the people, by society itself. So that's how I would understand socialism.
Okay, so that is a broad definition. The reason why I asked this question, because there are, I think, many definitions on offer of socialism.
Sure.
And there are variants of it.
Sure.
So which definition do you think your definition aligns with more towards? For example, you have Lenin's definition.
Right.
Then you have Trotsky's definition.
Right.
So, and there are other variants, obviously.
Sure.
So where do you think leaning towards?
Well, I'm what you would refer to as an orthodox Marxist.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and very much so. And I don't think that one could make I mean, obviously there were differences between Lenin and Trotsky and many others with respect to how to get to socialism. But I don't think there were significant differences between them about what socialism was. There were, however, significant differences between people like Marx, Engels, and Kropotkin, and various other anarchists, Proudhon, and others. For them, as well as Bakunin, for example, for them, socialism not only meant that the economic resources will be controlled by the people, but also meant other things with respect to the church and state. So they wanted the obliteration of the state as such. Whereas for orthodox Marxists, Leninists, Trotskyists, and the rest of it, Maoists, Guevaraists, etc., they understood that with the destruction of capitalism would be at the first stage of that, a different kind of state would be introduced, a state that would be under the democratic control of the people. It would be the people actually organized as a state. So the anarchists, on the other hand, and also certain, sort of libertarians, and certain, you could say, left communists would also be closer to the category of anarchists, that they would desire for the state to be completely destroyed on the eve of the proletarian revolution. I think that's an unrealistic goal.
Oh yes, of course. How do you think socialism can be implemented in Pakistan?
Right. So I think there's a number of very, very, very serious problems when we look at Pakistan. There is, first and foremost, if I look at the 7-decade history of Pakistan, it seems to me that there is a consistent effort by the elite to ensure that their privilege and status remains where it is. And they have consistently deprived the populace of Pakistan, and I'm counting East Pakistan within that, of their democratic franchise in one way or another. There have been so many different ways in which they've done that. Whether we talk about the military dictatorships, which is the most obvious way.
Oh yes, of course. It's been going on since ages.
It's been going on. Or we talk about hybrid regimes, or or we talk about constitutional changes, or we talk about such as the doctrine of necessity and these sorts of things that have been introduced, or we talk about the basic democracy system that was introduced in the 60s, etc. All of these are very or we talk about Zia's Islamization. All of these have basically been mechanisms through which the popular franchise, although even if it does exist, cannot be utilized in such a way that the public is able to gain access, real access to their democratic rights and to greater economic resources.
Basically have some control.
Absolutely.
A little control, and that's been the case in Pakistan.
That's been the case.
But
so that's the first aspect of the problem. The second aspect of the problem is that we are a post-colonial state. So in that context, we see that our industrialization has, in a certain sense, stalled. We are right now in a kind of stalled industrialization. We are experiencing incredible stagflation. But even if we were not experiencing stagflation, if you really look at the kind of industrialization we have achieved, it's not a sustainable model, as so many other economists have also pointed out. And so we have to understand the reasons why that's happened. And I strongly feel that as a third world country, we cannot achieve that kind of industrialization that is necessary for Pakistan without breaking through or without moving, without doing away with the framework that's been given to us by the International Monetary Fund and by neoliberal capitalism. We've got to break out of that mold in order to get further ahead. Now, I don't deny that there may be some countries that staying within the neoliberal mold, they are able to progress. I don't deny that. But what I'm saying is that not everybody can arrive at that destination within that model, because in that model there's going to be winners and losers. There's going to be countries that attract international capital, and they're going to grow dramatically, like Bangladesh is attracting international capital. They're always going to attract international capital by offering international capital the opportunity to basically turn around their capital and get a quick profit, get as much profit as possible. And that may not be something that all countries can do. So in that context, then there's a certain amount of capital that's going around the world. It's going to go to places where it can get the highest rate of profit. Yes. And the rest of the world is going to be, lingering around in this kind of limbo, in an economic, stagnation. And to break out of that, we've got to realize that we have to build a system where we can all arrive at our destination, not just a few people arriving and the rest of, the vast majority of the world just sitting around in limbo waiting for a miracle to happen. So those are both problems. There are other problems as well, social problems about human rights, women's rights, and minority rights, and so on. But they're all related to these two major things: political, the need for real substantive political democracy, and the need for real substantive economic democracy in Pakistan.
So, while you were talking about the different stages of development that each country is on,
right,
and which is obviously a fact. I mean, obviously America is on a different page, and we are on a different page, and every other country is on a different page. And it reminded me of, this question just popped up, that the reason why this global capitalistic model won't work for everyone is precisely what you just said, that because everyone is on a different page, and they have one recipe for all sort of solution. So what do you think about where Pakistan stands in this scenario?
No, I think that's a very good point, especially this criticism became quite prevalent in the 1990s and in the early 2000s when people like Naomi Klein and David Harvey and so many others began to write on this issue. Joseph Stiglitz is a fantastic writer in this regard. And this was one of the central criticisms, that the International Monetary Fund has imposed structural adjustment policies. The policies are exactly the same for all the different countries, no matter what their circumstances are. So that's entirely correct. But even if we don't look at, even if I were not looking at purely the policies introduced by structural adjustment policies, by the International Monetary Fund, still I would find that maybe the economic policies do slightly vary from one country to another. Let's take that as an example, although that's not really the case. But let's just hypothetically take that as an example. I still think that the way in which the international financial institutions are structured, the way in which the international political economy is structured, there are going to be big winners and losers in capitalism. And the winners are going to win big, the big winners are going to win big, and there are going to be a big number of losers. Consider for a moment that, consider your own city here, we're sitting in Karachi. Consider for a moment that in Karachi you have certain areas which are, you could call them the areas where you have the elite, right? So you have Clifton, I suppose, you have DHA and so on, right? And the people who work in those areas, people who clean the cars and clean the homes and tend to the bushes and create the beautifully manicured lawns, etc. They also live somewhere, don't they? And they probably live just in some tucked away corner close to DHA or close to Clifton. They commute to that place and they commute back. So my question to you is, what is Pakistan? Pakistan is not the DHA of the world. The DHA of the world is New York, it's London, it's Tokyo, it's Frankfurt and so on. We are the little dihat, the little ghetto that supplies labor to the world. That's where we stand in the International Division of Labor. And of course, we are able to create a small enclave that looks like a bit of New York here and there within Pakistan as well. But those remain tiny islands in a sea of poverty. And that's where I see, that's why that mechanism is not necessarily just created by policies per se, but it's created more by the structure, by the way in which the entire globalization has restructured the international political economy.
You painted quite a realistic picture of Pakistan.
Well, that's
it's actually true.
It's the reality.
Exactly, yes.
It's the reality that so many of us in casual conversations mention, but when we talk about economics, or political economy, sometimes we just kind of forget about that and just focus on interest rates and where is the capital going to come from, investment, and what's happening with inflation and so on. But we forget that actually it's got to be about people, real people. And the model that we have developed, this kind of neo-colonial, post-colonial capitalist development, it's failed. It's failed to provide the newly independent countries, the vast majority of people, it's failed to provide them a life which is humane, which is just, in which they can fulfill their aspirations. And to provide that life, Wajahat, is not at all hard now. Given the kind of technology we have, given the kind of resources now at the disposal, scientific and technological disposal at the fingertips of humanity, we can't even provide people clean water. We're not even able to control the floods. These are not technological problems anymore in the sense that we don't have the technology to solve them. These are now management problems that we're not able to solve them, even though we know what we need to do to solve them. Does it take a genius to figure out how to make sure that the water in Karachi flows out of the city quickly? If there's more than half an hour of rain, the water starts accumulating. Does it take a genius to figure out why water is accumulating? No, you can figure it out. You don't need Einstein to come and help us figure that out. And yet it's not being done. Does it take a genius to control, to understand how floods are to be controlled, what floodplains do, etc., how water management is supposed to be done? We've been doing it since the time of the Indus Valley civilization, have we not? Monsoons have come and gone, etc., and we had one of the most sophisticated water systems in the ancient world. So we've been doing it for centuries. So we can do it, but it's a management problem. Why are we not able to do it? Is it so difficult to figure out how to make electricity? I don't think so. We know how to make electricity, right? It's not a problem that we need to solve in the 21st century. It was solved in the last century.
Yeah.
But yet we have such a huge problem with electricity. There's load shedding everywhere. So these are not technical problems. These are not technological problems anymore. What these are problems of complete mismanagement in the way in which we are structured. These are structural problems. That's why we're experiencing. We could solve, with the current level of technology, if we could fix the system, we could solve the vast majority of basic problems within, I would say, a generation, perhaps even less, maybe a decade, with the current level of technology. If we were just able to reorder and restructure our society in a way in which society was structured to serve the needs of people, not just the needs of a small elite.
So, now keeping on the economic track, given the modern international economic policy apparatus that we have,
Yes.
there was a recent article in the Times literary supplement in which an economist, he was reviewing some book about interest rates.
Right.
He said that our economics or monetary economic policy is fixated upon two things:
Right.
interest rate and inflation.
That's exactly right. He's absolutely correct.
Control this, control. I mean, it's all. Now, my question to you is, what is a socialist solution, you can say, or apparatus or equipment that can be used to actually address monetary economic policy?
All right, so I think my recent video was precisely on this subject, and I've just kind of teased the subject a little bit.
Yes. Of course, if the viewers don't know, he has a great YouTube channel.
Thank you. So, why is this? Firstly, I think that point of view is entirely correct. The only now tools that the government has left remaining with which it can tinker and play with, especially after the way in which in the period of globalization, governments have been told that they must contract and not get involved in politics. The only tool left is to now either raise interest rates or lower interest rates. That's it. I mean,
That's the only tool they have.
That's the only tool that they've been left with. They could have had other tools, but they've been taken away. And that's a very, very indirect tool. For example, if I raise the interest rate, what I'm trying to do basically is control the money supply by making by disincentivizing banks from giving out big loans. And if they stop giving out big loans, etc., that contracts the money supply. And through that I try to control the inflation.
Yeah, they try to contract the money multiplier.
Exactly right. Now the thing is that when I do that, what happens? Unemployment starts going up. As soon as I control inflation, unemployment starts going up. As soon as I control unemployment, I say, all right, I got to make the economy grow. I'm a growth, prime minister or something. What do? I lower the interest rates so that banks may give out more loans. As soon as I do that, yes, unemployment goes down. Everybody's employed. But what starts happening? Inflation. I mean, this is a no-win situation for people. It's like if I said to you,
it's like a cycle that you can't get out of.
Yeah. If I said to you, Wajahat, I'm going to give you a great deal. Okay, the deal is you can either accept inflation or you can be unemployed. What do you want? I'm going to give you a job, but within a year you're going to lose like 20% of the money you make from the job. Or, tell you what, you won't lose any income, but you won't have any income to lose. I mean, is that the deal we're offering?
There is no win scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a no-win scenario for working people. And this is not some kooky, crazy alternative theory of economics. This is mainstream economics. This is the Phillips curve, right?
Exactly.
This is well established. So what are we offering people? And all of this is caused this is not something natural. It's not like this relationship between inflation and unemployment is something that's always existed in all of time. It's directly a product of capitalism, and specifically of finance capitalism and the way the economy is structured. That's what's causing it. So what if we would begin to think of a structure of society beyond capitalism? Why do we have to stay stuck to capitalism?
Yeah.
So that could be an interesting foray.
I think it's a good venture to go into. We've tried capitalism for a long time. We've tried different scenarios. We've tried every form of government in the past.
Let me put it to you this way, Vijay. You're absolutely right. I think about it this way, that when the International Monetary Fund comes to us and they say to us, oh, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right. Recently you sent me a video of, well, it was a tweet, but there were videos in it of Atif Mia. Yeah. And he was saying, oh, we need to do this right, we need to do that right. And mainly it was things covering like, we need to have more investment in education and technology, and we need to have better personnel, and we have so on and so forth. The whole of the talk, of that particular talk, was on what Pakistan is allegedly doing wrong. Mm-hmm. And I don't deny that we're doing a lot of things wrong. Yeah. But my question is, we have done, Wajahat, everything that the IMF has told us to do for the last, I don't know how many decades. How many times have we gone to the IMF and they said, do this, and then everything will be great. And we have carried that out to the letter, and I say we've carried that out to the letter because if we didn't carry it out to the letter, they wouldn't have given us the next loan. We did the best. We carried it out as best as it was humanly possible, without bringing the government down or something, right? Yeah. We've carried that out. Right now, we are carrying out exactly what the IMF has asked us to do. Mm-hmm. They have asked us do this with fuel prices, do that with fuel taxes, do this with
the fuel levy.
They make everything. Yes. For the ever since I have become politically conscious, for the last 30 years at least, since I was a teenager, since the 1990s, I cannot remember a time when a Pakistani government came to power and said, we are going to create an economic policy that is our own. Never. Every government that has come, whether it's Benazir Bhutto, whether it's Nawaz Sharif, whether it's General Musharraf, whether it's or whether it's Imran Khan, every government has been in a situation where they've been forced to go to the IMF. They've gone to the IMF has said do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, and so on. And we said, yes, sir, X, Y, Z, A, B, or yes, ma'am, depending on who the president of IMF is. And we carried it out. And where are we? Yeah. That's what I want to ask the IMF. We did everything that you asked us to do. And what is the result? Exactly. Where is the growth? Where is the poverty alleviation? We are stagnant. We are stagflating. And we did everything you asked us to do. And now when IMF turns around, or those Goras turn around and tell us, you're not doing it right, Vijay, you're not doing it right on, I feel like saying, hello, we carried out the policies that you asked us to carry out. This is the result of your policies, not the result of policies we made. So why are you not taking any responsibility for the results that you see are in front of you in Pakistan? Every time they're like, this is out of like, we haven't done anything, I mean, they bear no responsibility. They take no responsibility for what the economic mess of Pakistan.
This also begs another question about the rhetoric of capitalism, in the sense that, again, this goes back to that famous dictum, Marxist dictum, that the ideas of the ruling class are the ruling ideas of the society.
Yes, quite right.
And which the extrapolation of this can be that the rhetoric about economic policy is set by capitalism.
Yes, that's right.
And right now, the rhetoric is set by the head of capitalism, which is the IMF or the World Bank, let's say. And the rhetoric goes something like this. It's a meritocratic word. You are responsible for where you stand because you do not have the merit to be at the level where, for example, any other developed country stands.
Yes.
So you are guilty for your own disadvantage.
Exactly, for your own poverty.
Yeah, for your own poverty. Now, given this rhetoric, what do you think? How can we say to IMF, look, yes, this rhetoric is acceptable in meritocratic world, but this is not a meritocratic word at all. So how do you respond to this? I mean, what's the counter rhetoric?
I think you already responded to it. that the idea that we live in some sort of a meritocracy is a complete fiction. The fact of the matter is that if you are born in wealth, you have every opportunity to go abroad, to study, to go to the best universities, to take time off, to pursue your hobbies and passions and interests and so on. And if you are born poor, then life gives you no choices. The choices in front of you are should I sweep the streets during the day or should I sweep the streets during the night? Those are the choices. Should I beg on the streets or should I sell my body to make ends meet and feed my children? Those are the choices. Should I work myself to death in the factory or should I take my chances selling cholas on the street? Those are the choices. Those are not choices. Those are not real choices. It robs people. Poverty robs people of real life choices and real life chances. And what meritocracy? It's a complete fable, a complete myth. And what is true for the individual or for classes, let's say, is also true for countries. That it's not the case that one country is progressing and another is faltering because one country is made up of smarter people and cleverer people and so on and so forth, and they just have higher merit, etc. No, in fact, it's the opposite. It's success that creates merit. It's not merit that creates success. You have the cause and effect reversed. If I were to give the same opportunities that I had to somebody who was, there's a little vendor down there I can see from the street. If I gave his son the same opportunities that I had, maybe he would do 2 PhDs, maybe he'd do 4, maybe he'd be the next Albert Einstein, right? How do I know? I don't know. So what you see as, when you introduced me and you said these are my qualifications, these are my merits, this is why you respect me. Well, in a certain sense, I have to concede that all those are also the result of my own privilege. I mean, sure, I had the opportunity, I took advantage of it and I did well. To that extent, you can credit me, right? But, and maybe there are some other people who have the same opportunities and they didn't, pursue those things in the same way. But the fact of the matter is, give people opportunity, you will see that their skill level, their merit, their understanding, their idea, everything will grow and develop. All of that develops because of opportunity. So you have everything backwards. It's not that it's not that the individual that appears successful isn't necessarily successful because of merit, but it's also that the success that you, and the qualities that you associate with that successful individual are themselves sometimes, and most times I'd say, a product of that success. The success itself may be a product of very random things. Just being the right person at the right place at the right time can make you successful. Having the right podcast at the right time can make you successful, right? It's not a meritocratic world in that sense. A lot of it is just chance. Look at the derivatives market, look at the stock market, etc. I mean, so much of it is completely stochastic. It's completely random and by chance. And so I don't believe in that theory at all. And I think the idea that capitalism is meritocratic is actually the single biggest fallacy that we see. I don't see any meritocracy in the fact that some are born in wealth and others are born in such grinding poverty that they can't even send their children to school. What kind of merit are we talking about? So a lot of people say, well, let's level the playing field, at least make education, healthcare should be for everyone. Basic level of roti, kapda, makan, as they say. Yeah. Basic needs have to be met for everyone. Then I think there would be some basis to say that, all right, there would be some basis to say that you deserve credit for developing these skills that you did. But otherwise, it's like, you have 2 people starting a race, but one person is standing here, 10 yards from the finish line. The other person is standing way back there. And then on top of that, they have like this big beady on their foot.
Weighted or
completely. They might have parents that are sick and need to be taken care of. There's so many other problems.
So now, moving forward from economic policy to socialism and religion.
Sure.
Because this is one
that's going to be a spicy topic.
You've made a couple of videos in the past, and recently you have been convicted also, and we know it by a tweet that there is a case on you. I don't know what happened of that, but anyway, there is something going on. But my point is, what's the role of religion in socialism? First of all, because we need to be clear on the fact that what role does religion play? The reason why I ask this question is because if you look at China, their state religion is atheism.
No.
Is that the case?
No, it's not.
It's not the case.
It's not.
Okay, if that is not the case, then what do you think is the role of religion in a socialist state?
Right. So there's two levels at which I can answer this question. First is the level of the state. As far as a socialist state is concerned, religion is a private affair of the individual, of the citizen. Whatever that religion is, whether there is a religion or isn't a religion, whatever kind of religion it is, it's got nothing to do with the affairs of the state. It's your private matter, it's your relationship with the Creator, or however you want to define it. As long as, of course, religion is not used in some way to oppress somebody else, or commit violence, or those sorts of things, as long as those sort of things are left out of it. Otherwise, religion is purely the private affair of the individual. The second aspect is as far as the ideas of socialism themselves are concerned. As far as the ideas of socialism are concerned, these ideas are secular. What we mean by that is that they are not based on religion. They are scientific ideas. So again, in that context, you could be religious personally, but when you address a particular problem, let's say, if you're a scientist, right, but you're also religious, but when you do science, do you mix your religion with science? When you do science, you have to prove your theorem, your hypothesis, by looking at the evidence. It doesn't matter what your belief is. Okay, you could be Christian, Buddhist, Sikh, whatever you are. Yeah. The criteria for all the scientists is the same regardless of your religion. And that criteria is evidence, 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 evidence. Where is the evidence? Correct? Mm-hmm. So that's what you look at as a natural scientist. So a scientist may be religious, but scientists cannot do science by using religion. When they do science, they do just that. They do science, and it has its own criteria. In much, socialism is the same. That when we look at a social problem, let's say through a Marxist perspective, we want to find the answer for it, we are going to try to be social scientists. We're going to look at the evidence, we're going to look at the data. Exactly. You're a data analyst. Yeah. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're Sikh, Christian, Muslim, atheist, whatever you are. Okay. The data is there. We're going to look at the data. Never lies. The data will tell you what's going on, right? So we look at the data, we look at how, what correlations and combinations and relationships are formed from it. Exactly. Yeah. And then we try and find a solution. Mm-hmm. So that is how socialism looks at every problem. It looks at every problem like a physicist would, like a chemist would, like any good scientist would. So socialists are social scientists. They are not, so when they do social science, they are subject to the same criteria of science as everyone else. And to do good science, you need to show your conclusions from the evidence, from the data, from the logic of your argument, whether it's deductive or inductive or however you show it, but that is the foundation of socialism. So as a doctrine, socialism is, you could say, a-religious. It's a scientific doctrine. Just like science is a-religious, socialism is much the same.
So that means that state does not interfere in the private affairs of an individual.
That's correct.
And religion is considered as a private state of affair.
Yes.
That's fine?
In relation to the state, correct.
So if that is the case, so which means that there are two domains. One is private, the other is state. Public.
Yes.
And religion lies in the private
correct.
sphere, not the public sphere.
That's absolutely right.
Now, that makes sense. But what if now you can almost see where I'm going. What if the very, you can say, creation of a state is dependent upon a religion? And it is a public sphere. So there are three countries.
Right.
That are created in the name of religion.
Right.
We have Pakistan, Israel, and South Sudan now in
right.
the name of Christianity. How do you see socialism in these states?
Right. So, I mean, our idea is, firstly, I'd say that it's easy to make the mistake of thinking that Pakistan was created to become a theocratic Islamic state. Especially in our generation, because we grew up in the Ziaul-Haq period, where this was the central idea that Pakistan was created so we could have created an Islamic state. But if you look at, in my view, if you look at if you go back in history and you look at what was going on before 1947 and even what Jinnah was saying on 11th August, etc. I mean, he very clearly states that religion will have nothing to do with the affairs of the state. That's his speech on 11th August. And that Hindus will cease to be Hindus and Muslims will cease to be Muslims, not in the personal sense, because that is the faith of every individual, but in the political sense. So again, what does that mean? In the political sense, we are not going to discriminate between Hindus and Muslims. So that means that the state is not going to be a religious state. It's going to be a state where every citizen is equal, whether you're Muslim or Christian or whatever you are. So in that sense, then I do not see. I see what happened during the Zia period as being, in fact, a departure from that particular vision that Jinnah laid down on 11th August 1947, where he tried to convert the state into a theocratic state, and then retroactively kind of told us, well, that was the intention all along.
Okay.
The real, and actually the reason why Zia also undertook that process of Islamization, we can understand it, which is, it's not difficult for us to fathom, is because at that time he wanted to break the hold of the populist and popular movement, both of the Pakistan People's Party as well as generally of the left. So to break that movement, he chose this process of Islamization. First we're going to do Islamization, then we'll have democracy. We're not ready for democracy because our thinking isn't democratic enough. First we're going to do this. So that was a very transparent attempt to destroy the opposition to Zia's policies and to his dictatorship. So for that reason, I think that, and then of course the whole history was rewritten, that Pakistan somehow or the other was conceived the very day that Muhammad bin Qasim landed here in the 7th century, which is an absurd idea.
Yeah, it is an absurd idea.
Nobody's ever spoken about it. Nobody's even uttered the word before. So anyway, so that's, I think, the one thing that we have to consider. But the other aspect of your question remains solid, which despite what I've just said, which is that we are now living in a society after Zia's Islamization, where Islam plays a very significant and important role in everyday life and in people's lives, etc. So in that context, I would again venture to say that given that our view on religion is that religion is the private affair of every individual, we believe in the full freedom of religious practice as well as non-practice. We believe in the protection of all religious groups and their right to practice. We consider it a democratic right that should not be violated by any socialist state. And given also that we consider that in fact a neutral secular state, by neutral I mean it will be neutral between all the different kinds of religion that exist within a given society, is in fact the best guarantee you have for real religious freedom. What happens when you have an Islamic, let's say, what happens in Pakistan if you decide tomorrow that we're going to have an Islamic state? The first thing is that the non-Muslims of Pakistan are going to be relegated to second-class citizenship. That's the number one thing. That the next day that's going to be the case. What we call dhimmi, etc., right? Second-class citizens. Now that had some justification in 7th century Arabia. Today it's a very different situation. It's a very different scenario. Most of the religious minorities are anyway in a very poor and bad state in Pakistan. The Christian community of Punjab, for instance, they're not the capitalists of Punjab. They are very, very poor people. They're working class people. To deprive them further of a stake in governance, etc., is not right. It's not just. Secondly, then you have the increased problem of sectarianism within Islam. You have,
that's a big problem.
it's a huge problem.
It's a big problem.
You have the conflict between the, Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat and the versus the Ahl Tashi.
Yeah.
Then you have the problem between the Deobandi and the Barelvis, who both throughout history have considered each other as being, as having committed biddat, right? And both have fatwas against each other that these people are outside the pale of Islam. Then you have the Wahhabi element, separate from that. So you will have a situation where one or another of these groups will capture the state. Either the Barelvis or the Deobandis or someone else will capture the state, and then they will say this is the correct interpretation, which will relegate even Muslims, believing Muslims who pray 5 times a day, who go to the mosque and pray, and who keep all their rozas and everything. It will also push them into second-class citizenship status. You've seen what kind of sectarianism and violence we have seen. So what is it that socialists recommend? Socialists recommend that the state should be neutral between Barelvis and Deobandis and Tashi and Sunnis and all the citizens of Pakistan, all the religious communities. It should treat them equally, fairly. The same rule of law should be applied to all of them. Maybe not in personal matters, not in personal law, because there we can, people marry in different ways, and that's absolutely fine. But in relation to, so as I was saying,
the controversial bit. Yes.
The controversial bit is that, in my view, the prophets themselves never discriminated between people on the basis of religion. Where they found somebody was suffering and oppressed, they stood with the person who was being oppressed, and they stood against the oppressor, regardless of what the religion of the oppressed person was. And not only that, not only did they stand with all those who were oppressed, regardless of their religion. That's why the oppressed, said, these are our prophets, these are our guides, these are our leaders. We will sacrifice our life for them. Not only did they stand for the oppressed, regardless and irrespective of what religious group or what color of the skin of the oppressed was. Not only that, but even when they were being persecuted, killed, stoned, maimed, fought against, even then they turned around and said, I don't want any evil to fall to these people. When Jesus was on the cross, we learn from the Bible, he said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. What a powerful statement. When Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to Taif, where the elders told the children, throw stones at this person. When he walked out, his shoes were filled with blood. And we read, you and I, we are told this lesson. In class 5 we are told this lesson. That that angels came to him and said, O Prophet of God, if you give the command, we will level this entire city for what they have done to you. What was his response? Did he say, yes, level them because they are kafir and they mistreated me? No. He said, bless them. I do not want any harm to fall to them. They don't know what they do. Tomorrow they will realize their mistake and they will come to the right path. That is what we're talking about.
That is tolerance.
That is tolerance.
That is tolerance.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. But we have so little tolerance that we are not ready to think that the state ought to consider everybody equal. One last thing.
Yeah,
when the Prophet created the first Medinan state, which Imran Khan always refers to, people should read the Charter of Medina. The protection of the Jewish clans, the protection of the Christian clans, the protection of all the clans. He was not just a leader of the Muhajirs who came with him to Makkah. He was the leader of the entire city, irrespective and regardless of what people's faith and religion was. And he would educate as judge. He would solve their problems. He would, judge their, whatever issues they had to create a harmonious society. So did he say at any point, okay, this is a Jew and this is a Muslim, so, if he's been wronged, I won't protect him? No. He defended and protected everybody who deserved to be defended and protected. We socialists say the same thing.
No, you remind me of so many events. I mean, it's क्या कहते हैं उसको जो पूरे किस्से होते हैं अंबिया के.
जी.
They are filled with these.
Absolutely. Hazrat Ali's famous dictum that he was fighting another person, and he defeated him, and the person sort of fell, and then that kafir who was fighting against, and had he won, he wouldn't probably not have hesitated a second before throwing a sword at Hazrat Ali. But when he fell, he spat at him, and when he spat at him, Hazrat Ali stopped. He said, yesterday I was fighting you for Islam, but if I throw my sword at you now, if I agar main war karun ab, so it will not be for Islam, it will be for my vengeance and revenge and my anger, and I am not going to do that. That's remarkable. And everybody knows this.